Welcome to the 27th episode of the It's Been Said podcast. I'm your host, SAI Executive Director Lisa Remy. Each show is dedicated to conversations on leadership as we further SAI's mission to support, encourage, and develop Iowa's educational leaders and learners. Today, I'm excited to welcome Christina Hidek. Christina is a recovering attorney turned professional organizer and certified PTO volunteer nerd. She founded PTO Answers 7 years ago to boost family engagement in schools and empower parents to improve their child's educational experience and school community through PTA, PTO involvement. She's been an active PTO leader for the past 14 years and hosts the vibrant 8,000 plus member Superstar PTO Leaders Facebook group. When she's not volunteering, you can find her in her garden, listening to the latest Catherine Center audiobook, or walking the family dogs. Welcome, Christina.
I'm so glad to be with you, Lisa.
Yeah, well, we're happy to have you today. So, Christina, tell our listeners what inspired you to transition from a career in law to becoming a professional organizer and PTO advocate.
Well, one, I wanted to see the children I had. So that was my initial or my greatest impetus for making the transition. And two, I'm a lot more fun than most attorneys. So that wasn't like my crowd. And how I got to be involved with PTO is that I really ultimately wanted to make friends. And I always have had a background of service and giving back. And so it was really a no-brainer to get involved when my oldest started kindergarten. Like I started going to PTO meetings right away because I had a couple friends and I eventually got them involved in the PTO, but they weren't initial joiners, like, because they were more introverted and I'm an extroverted extrovert. So it made sense for me to go and meet people.
Fabulous. It's, being a former school leader myself, whether a building level leader or superintendent, we always really appreciated the parent volunteers, whether it was through PTA, PTO, or just coming together on other committees that we had in the district. So always appreciate people like yourself who were willing to give of their time to help support not only their kids, but the full school family. So thank you for doing that. Our main audience for our podcast includes superintendent and principals. So let's first start with superintendents. In some cases, a single parent or guardian group may support all the schools in a district due to a size. So what advice would you give superintendents for developing positive and thriving relationships with these organizations, with parent groups?
I think it's just to show up. I've had 3 superintendents in my PTO career, and the first one I didn't really get to know. That was very early on in my career, and I think in my career, yeah, it is a career. I'm going to own it, name it, and claim it, because too many people are dismissive of parent volunteers, and the portrayal in the media is far from positive. And so I am going to say it is a career because just like anybody else who's giving back their time, whether it's the League of Women Voters or another nonprofit organization. Anyway, so I've been really blessed to have really good relationships and unusual relationships with my superintendents. I have been a unit president for each of the PTOs in my children's schools, as well as the PTOs in my district are actually PTAs. So we're nationally affiliated with the Parent Teacher Association. And so we have a district council level. So I was also the president there. I guess my advice is just to show up. Like the whole reason all of this is based in education, so much is based on relationships, because you can get people where they need to be based on the relationship. Like if you don't have a good relationship with them, whether it is a student, a staff member, another administrator, like if you don't have that relationship, it's going to be hard to work with them. And so I found that the very first superintendent was kind of on the tail end of his career, I will say. And so I don't remember where he went after he left our district, but the next superintendent I got to know right away. She had initiated a strategic planning, like strategy session. And so it was very involved. and really set forth a plan for, I think, 5 or 6 years. And so that's how I first got to know her. And then I continued to interact with her because I was in a leadership position. She made herself very approachable. So like I felt comfortable going to her with problems and going, I don't even know if this is on your radar, because the scope of what superintendents are tasked with keeping on their overflowing plate is great, and it's too much. And so I figured I would try and be helpful where I could. But it was her openness and her authenticity, really, because I never felt like she didn't value my feedback. In fact, there were several times when I'd send her an email and she's like, all right, I want you to come in and we're going to bring in all these other people that are involved to like really talk about this, because I think you brought something to my attention that really we can fix. So that was a positive way for me to give back. So that would be my recommendation to others. But I'm always about relationships, because this is all, like I said, it's all relationship based.
Yeah, I really appreciate you bringing up relationships. When I was in my admin program, and just about ready to be done, one of my professors said, Lisa, I give you 3 pieces of advice so that you'll be successful in any leadership role. And it was always remember relationships, relationships, relationships. So it doesn't matter whether you're a building level leader, central office leader, superintendent, teacher, right? I mean, those relationships matter, and we're better together for sure than separate. Would your advice be different for building level leaders and superintendents? If so, how?
I don't think so. You're going to have a more closer relationship, because you're going to have more contact points with a building level leader than perhaps a superintendent. I have had very positive relationships with my building principals.
Do you think there's a difference based on your knowledge and expertise, a PTO and the relationship in a smaller school district than a larger school district, and how that functions? What are your thoughts around that?
The opportunities and challenges might be inverse depending on the size. Like with a smaller community, everyone knows everyone. So you can draw upon those relationships to kind of incentivize people to get involved. Because that's always what I do, is like I reach out and try and be very enthusiastic and authentic about my interest in people getting involved. So like one of my go-to recruitment tactics is to chat somebody up, which is not, it's well within my skill set, because again, I'm an extroverted extrovert. I can talk to anybody about almost anything. So I just start having a conversation with them, and then I look based on their interest level and what they're saying back. If I think there's an opportunity for them to get involved where I think they actually could, like they have the bandwidth, then I'll say, you know what, I love us talking here, and I think you would really enjoy coming to the next meeting. It's at this time, at this date, I'd really love for you to come. And then every time I would see them between the time of our conversation and the meeting, I just point out and be like, Tuesday at 7, I'll see ya, and just like check in with them. You can do that, and that works for a smaller or a big school. But I don't know, sometimes in a larger district, you just have to treat it like a smaller school, like have a smaller pool. I think the problem, especially with like parent involvement, is that people cast like too wide of a net and make it too generic, non-personalized. And so everybody else thinks that somebody else is going to be taking care of it. But if you have more of a dialed in strategy where you're just looking for those parents who are showing up to walk their kids home from the flagpole as opposed to the car line, like that's a way to make it small and very doable, because you just try and talk to somebody different. Like don't stay in your own world. As far as like events, everything's scalable. Like it's not that much more work to do, let's say, a trunk or treat. This was like my go-to elementary school family event, our family fun program. And we were initially going to do it for just our elementary school, but then we're like, why don't we just invite the other elementary schools? Because if you're going to do something for 300 kids, to do it for 1,000 kids is really not that much more work. It's just scaled up. You're not repeating the time of having to carve out the date, the place, the time, the building permit or the space permit, all that. That's like, it's all done. You're just inviting more people. So it can really benefit you in that situation. So I think if you're like, back to your first question, have one parent group for the entire district, multiple buildings, I think that's really hard. I would not recommend that because not everybody has the same interests. Like some people are more in it for themselves and their children rather than more globally. And that's not always a bad thing, but it's just recognizing how some people operate, where I understand and I've been involved for so long that I know that the benefits are going to come back to me. And that's not why I'm actually in it. So it's just like different motivations, right? So like there's a neighboring community that they have one district or one PTO for the entire district, and they don't really do that much. Because I've had friends that have moved to that community, and I'm like, they're like, yeah, they just don't do, it's just not the same. So I'd really encourage people to kind of rethink the model that they're using to hone it down so each building has their own home group and encourage collaboration and cross-pollination, because that's certainly there's a lot of things that you can do across the district.
Yeah, I'm hearing you say it can be more personal when you have it at that building level versus just one district.
Yeah, because well, the thing is, schools aren't cookie cutter. You know, they're in the same school district, but they have different needs.
SAI is excited to connect with you on Facebook. We just launched our official page. Follow us online at SAI Iowa. We love to post positive stories about your school and district leaders. Please like and share our posts and tag us on your own so we can help share more positive stories.
So, what is, in your opinion, the largest barrier that you've seen districts and or schools face when trying to develop sustainable, healthy parent guardian groups?
I think it's assuming that the leaders have the training or resources that they need. There is no school that teaches you how to be a PTO leader, except for maybe like treasurer. That would be the only one. Like even principals, there is no, I've talked to a lot of people who are former principals, former superintendents, and they're like, yeah, this isn't covered. Like how to work with parent groups. This is not covered anywhere in our training. Not even like if you go on to become a superintendent, like the additional administrative training, it's just not covered. So I think it's the same can be true for everybody. Like nobody has the training. Everyone's trying to do the best that they can. But I think the lack of resources, because you're dealing with parent volunteers who are giving of their time. They're often fitting it in at the expense of their personal family. But a lot of times I would look when my kids were younger, I'm like, oh, I just have to finish carnival and then my house can get back to normal. So anyway, they're giving of their own time, but they're only ever coming in with whatever life experience they have, whether they have had professional experience, maybe in their job. Like I was, again, I'm a recovering attorney. So I had a lot of experience, especially in conflict management. I was used to dealing with very stressful situations where I had to keep my cool. And I'm systems oriented and process, but I have that background, but not everybody comes in as a PTO volunteer with those career skills or their previous experience on other nonprofits. Like I was in a sorority in college and then continued to be involved in my alumni group. And so I had to deal with, setting budgets and planning events. Like not a lot of people come in with those skills. And these are things that need to be taught. I think building leaders, they're so busy and it's like, can't they just don't they just have what they need? Can't they just figure it out? It's like, well, yeah, but there's a really high learning curve. So they can combat that with equipping them with what they need and not assuming they already have it or that they know what to ask for.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really good advice. So what I'm hearing you say is, taking that time with those new parent groups and talking about, this is kind of really just setting that expectation, the clarity, giving them resources that they need. Yeah. So it goes back to kind of fostering that relationship as well.
For sure. For sure. And it doesn't have to be the building leader working with the entire PTO. Like I always suggest really concentrating your efforts on the relationship building with the group president, because they're the head, just as the building leader is the head of the building, the PTO president is the head of the group. And so if the two leaders kind of meet together and get on the same page about how they're going to communicate, how often they're going to communicate, what things, like what are the guidelines, what are the like things that are out of bounds, like I guess just agreeing on the boundaries, having the conversation early on in the summer before the building leader has their break, if they get a break. Because a lot of PTOs that have their stuff together will plan during the summer months, because it's easier to plan and know where you're going than to be planning during the school year. Because I have a good friend and she calls it like, you don't want to be building the airplane while you're trying to fly it. PTOs that have their agenda together literally create that agenda over the summer. And so then you can meet again right before school starts to again check in, see where you guys are, if there have been changes in the district that the PTO needs to know about, and if the PTO needs support or if there's opportunities for collaboration. Like at that point, it's still really early on in the year where that can happen. And if you're not checking in, then it can just lead to either conflict or wasted time or miscommunications, and really ultimately frustration on everybody's part. And that's just not, I don't think anybody wants to start a new school year on that foot.
Yeah, agreed. So how do you think, Christina, social media impacts parent engagement?
When school districts or when schools are posting about the PTO, it's showing that there is a partnership, that we value this group. We value that they're doing this, so much so that we're going to spend time promoting it. And so I think that can be a really easy way to demonstrate your support for the PTO and really come through as a partner. And it also is a way for the school to demonstrate all the fun stuff that the parent group is doing. Because a lot of times the parent groups are adding the extras, like literally the cherry on top.
Yeah, awesome. So you've built a vibrant online community of PTO, PTA leaders. What role has this group played in supporting PTO members, and how do you see it evolving in the future to strengthen that school-family partnership?
I think evolving in the future, I think one of the biggest challenges is coming out of the pandemic, that groups have not been able to show the value of their groups. Like for existing parents, like I am a huge believer in, you have to see it to understand the value and understand why you need to be involved, because the PTOs a lot of times are building programs and putting on events that you wouldn't do yourself. They're just too much hassle. Like take a trunk or treat, for example. Like, are you going to get 30 of your neighbors and your friends and family to like all meet somewhere in a parking lot on some day in October to do like a fun trunk or treat? No, that's like weird and like way too much work, but the PTO can do it and provide something special for the kids that they couldn't otherwise get and really have a community event. And so coming out of the pandemic, like everybody had to scale back, like necessarily so. But I think that there's going to be like, I'm kind of worried because in my own district, I've seen decreased involvement at the elementary level, and that funnels up to the high school. We're really going to have to work to develop volunteers to get them more involved. But there's the lag because we couldn't have the events. So now it's like, go and have an event, because that's when people go, oh, like, yeah, this was really fun. I want this to happen again. And then they go, who's in charge of that? Like maybe they're so clued out that they don't even know who is in charge. They just think it's a school, because a lot of PTOs are really bad about branding and like naming and claiming their awesomeness. Like the parents don't know. If you're not involved, you might not understand. You might think it is the school doing it.
So we all know how important regular school attendance is. In what ways do you believe, Christine, that the PTO can work alongside school administrators to help improve that communication with families on the importance of regular attendance?
Well, I think the first thing is that the principal or the teacher liaison or the other building leaders who are identified can come to the PTO meeting and express that this is an initiative and look for ways for each other to support. I think the PTOs they can do an incentive program. They could plan a party for the kids who come, or an event. Like one of the most unrecognized benefits of working with the PTO is the individual members to say things to other parents and community members that the school cannot, We can just say things that schools can't, and we can say it in ways they can't. Some parents really tune out the school because it's too much or they have too much going on, but they might listen to their next door neighbor who's a PTO member who happens to know that there's an attendance initiative going on.
Yeah, definitely. We all know how attendance, the correlation to academic achievement and attendance in school. And so again, working together with the families, the parents, it just helps improve attendance for all of the kiddos.
What school building leaders could do is go to your PTOs and ask, what do you think? Just having that conversation that this is a focus of the year and we'd love your help and we'd love your input.
So you manage a Facebook group, a PTO, PTA Facebook group. What have you found are the biggest challenges PTO leaders face, and how can they overcome those obstacles to really improve that or drive engagement?
I think it's access to resources and training. So, like I said, the leaders are coming in with a willingness and a motivation to give back, get involved, make a difference. But they have to figure out what to do and what the job is before they can actually do it. So that's so frustrating. And it doesn't even matter if you're a PTO or a PTA. Are you clear on the differences between PTO and PTA?
It might help to, share that with our
in case
listeners.
anybody listening is not clear.
Yeah.
So PTA is essentially the brand name of a PTO. So if you think about it, like I always equate it to facial tissue since that's so easy. So all PTAs are PTOs, but not all PTOs are PTAs. So parent-teacher organizations are essentially facial tissues, and PTAs are the puffs, the Kleenex, the Scotties.
So, there are parents who are new, right, to maybe their first child in school, or they haven't participated in a PTO or PTA, or they've been hesitant, right, at times to get involved. So what advice would you give any of the parents to help them feel more confident and understand the impact they can have for their child's school experience by being involved?
No, absolutely no one comes in knowing how to do this, like everything. Like I think if you're starting from a point of I can't do this, or the other person is so fantastic that I could never live up, just your willingness to consider stepping up means that you are part of a very small select group of individuals who has really the chutzpah to even think about it and to give back. So that's the first thing. And this is like, you can always learn more.
So Christina, is there anything that I haven't asked you that you think it would be important for our listeners, our Iowa administrators to know when it comes to building those thriving PTO relationships?
I think one, it is absolutely worth your time, the small amount of time that you need to invest, because let's be clear, you do need to invest some time. This is not just going to happen on its own. But if you take the time, it will pay off for you in spades. You will be able to shift a lot of the parent engagement work that you really want to see happening in your school district. You will be able to shift that, to delegate, to partner with the PTO to make that happen. And there are going to be such benefits to your school community that you're not even aware of. And then the second part, in order to make that happen, you really have to equip your leaders with resources. So let's talk, we haven't talked about the resources. I've referred to some of the kind of resource, or referred to the lack of resources in training. So some of the specific things that I would recommend is that every single officer have a binder kit. Just knowing that not everybody is as tech savvy as you might be. So you kind of have to, you do have to have that in paper, and people take in information in different ways too. So in the binder should be the bylaws and standing rules for the group, like a lot, very few. I think there's less focus on the nerdy things because people get overwhelmed by bylaws and standing rules, but really that can act as a set of guardrails to keep everybody on the same page. So people aren't just making things up, like everyone is following the agreed upon rules of the game, and that the building leaders will also know them. And so it can really help rein in people who are not playing nicely with others. So you can refer back to those. So you should have those. And then summaries of past events, meeting agendas, like all this stuff that you need to do to kind of do your job. It depends on what the role is. Like the fundraising chair is going to need like information about past fundraisers. The family events chair is going to need information on local vendors. So you really have to have that kind of customized information. And then also training is good because, like I said, unless the treasurer is one of the few rules where you might have someone who had a career like as a CPA or a bookkeeper, an accountant, the rest of other people, like there's no family fund chairs out in the world. There's no historians really like who are keeping track of like who's coming to meetings and volunteer hours and seeing exactly where you guys are making a difference. Like there's no correlation out in the real world for those positions. So that can be really helpful. Part of the reason why I started my business, PTO Answers, is because I wasn't seeing those resources. Like I didn't have them for me personally. So I developed them for me to use personally. And I thought, oh, well, other people probably are in the same boat that I am and don't have these, and they're not going to maybe necessarily take the time to develop them. So that's kind of how that came to be. And then the group came because I wanted a really nice landing place. Some of the other groups in the world were kind of more drama filled, and I don't have time for drama. I want love, support, inspiration, motivation. And so that's exactly what you'll find in my Facebook group. It's called the Superstar PTO Leaders. It's a really nice place where you can get your questions answered. I do have a blog that I post to frequently with kind of longer answers to questions, but the Facebook group is an excellent resource for both the individual parent leaders as well as the school leaders. Like there are several, I don't know if I have any superintendents, but I know for sure I have teachers and principals who are part of the group, just to kind of get different ideas, because the groups have been around, it'll be 8 years very shortly. And so there's a ton of information in there to help. So you might not even have to ask a question. You can just search in the group and it'll pop right up for you.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you for one, being willing to be on our podcast and sharing those resources. I know when our Iowa school leaders listened to the podcast and they could share with their PTO leaders how to get connected. So thank you so much. Really appreciate your time today, Christina.
Oh, sure. And if I have one more, I do have a freebie for the school leaders as well as teachers, if I can just give you the information about that. So I have a PTO family engagement opportunity assessment. It's a freebie. That sounds like very assessment. You think you're going to like pass or fail. It's only going to highlight the opportunities for you of where you can take advantage, where you can leverage your group, your parent group a little bit more to help you meet your family engagement goals. So building leaders can grab that at ptoanswers.com/principles. And for teachers, I have a freebie that gives insight about how to work with parent groups better in their classrooms. And so that is at ptoanswers/teachers.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Christina. I really appreciate it. And thank you for your service. That's
Thank you.
Yeah, like I said, it is so important that schools and families work together. It just betters everyone, the school community. So thank you so much.
Oh, well, you're so welcome. I know I have personally benefited from the relationships, and I've so enjoyed talking about this. I'm very nerdy, passionate about it because I think it's really so important. And I know what my involvement in my group's involvement has meant for my school district. And I just want that for everybody because it's all good.
Yeah. Thank you so much. You have a great rest of your day and weekend.
Thanks, you too.
Join us for our next episode, where I'll be joined by Dr. Darren Hawk, Assistant Superintendent for Ankeny Community School District. Together, we'll dive into the SAI Leadership Coaching Program and explore how it has the potential of leveling up leaders and driving impact. Don't miss it.